In Destiny 2, we currently have 9 total subclasses, each with a top, middle, and bottom tree option for perks. I thought it would be fun to rank all 27 of these subclass options into a PvP tier list with some friends. So this video is a collaboration project with some fellow YouTuber friends of mine, more on them in a minute. We decided that it made the most sense to rank these subclass options based on overall effectiveness in PvP. This means that we're evaluating how well they can slay out in 6v6 modes, compete in things like Survival and Trials of Osiris, and how effective they are as picks in private match scrims and tournament play. Some subclasses are better than others in various modes, and I'll try to make note of these differences as we review each option. I also wanted to mention that our final tier list placements are evaluating the potential of each of these subclasses when played at the highest skill levels, not necessarily how easy they are to do well with for newer players. So without further ado, I want to introduce 3 close friends of mine who made this video possible by contributing gameplay clips featuring the subclass demonstrated in this video, as well as working with me to establish the tier list. These are Brave X Hero, Apathettic, and Castle is Live. I'll have links to each of their channels in the description, as well as links to particular builds utilizing some of these subclasses throughout the video. I'd really appreciate it if you take a second to subscribe to their channels after watching this video, and leave a comment on their linked video letting them know that you found them through this collaboration project. Okay, so let's quickly discuss the rules of our tier list and then we'll get into the rankings. We decided to go with a typical S through D tier ranking system, S being the highest tier and D is the lowest. The order in which the subclasses appear within a particular rank doesn't matter for this list. For example, anything within the B tier would be considered to be effectively at the same level. Let's cover Titan first, then Warlock, and save the best for last, Hunter. So starting with the Arc Striker Titan, let's talk about the top tree, Code of the Earthshaker. Our perks here are Aftershocks, damaging enemies with Seismic Strike recharges your grenade. Seismic Strike, after sprinting for a short time, uses melee ability to slam shoulder first into your target and release an arc explosion on impact. Magnitude, gain an additional grenade charge, increase the duration of grenade effects. And Terminal Velocity, Fist of Havoc's ground slam attack, leaves a damage dealing field in its wake and deals more damage the longer it's in the air. Okay, so I think the first thing to mention on this tree is the Seismic Strike, which is the one-hit kill shoulder charge ability that allows Titans to lock onto a target and kill them, which consumes your melee charge. This can also damage nearby enemies in a pretty generous area of effect field. This ability is considered a bit overpowered at the lower levels of PvP, but basically a non-factor in higher tiers, where good players will typically not let you get close enough to pull it off. Shoulder charge is also a little bit inconsistent with its hit detection sometimes. This ability can also be paired with Insurmountable Skull Fort that recharges your melee attack and regens health on kill. The extra grenade charge here is nice to have, and it can basically simulate having a few extra tiers of discipline for free. They also last a little bit longer than the middle or bottom tree striker grenades, and may earn you an extra kill from time to time. For example, a pulse grenade lasts about 6.5 seconds on top tree and only 5 seconds on the middle or bottom tree. You'll also occasionally pick up an extra kill from the damaging effect created by the Terminal Velocity perk, but overall this variant of the super is not nearly as strong as the middle or bottom tree. For PvP, the time spent in the air while activating Fist of Havoc is pretty much a non-factor. We're going to put this one in the C tier. Next up is Middle Arc Titan, Code of the Missile. Our perks here are Ballistic Slam. After sprinting, leap into the air and press a melee button to slam into the ground and damage targets. Thunder Crash, hurl through the air like a missile and crash into enemies to inflict meteoric damage. Impact Conversion, hitting enemies with Ballistic Slam grants super energy and activates Inertia Override, and Inertia Override, picking up ammo during a slide reloads your equipped weapon and increases weapon damage for a short time. This subclass has a ton of perk synergy around the slam. Essentially, you fly up in the air and crash down onto a target, which damages them and knocks back any opponents within range of the blast radius. Getting hits with the slam both grants you super energy through impact conversion, as well as reloading your weapon and increasing damage through inertia override. The extra super energy is nice to have, but not all that strong in PvP, since using the slam also consumes your melee charge, so it's not like you can do it over and over again. The bigger problem though is that after the slam, you're like a sitting duck and good players will be ready to jump away from the slam to avoid it and then kill you quickly afterwards. Inertia is very effective in a 1v2 situation where you kill someone, slide over the ammo to pick it up and reload, and then win the second fight with that extra damage buff. However, the inertia buff only lasts about 4 seconds, which really isn't all that long. Thunder Crash is extremely effective in modes like Trials of Osiris, where it's pretty much a guaranteed kill once you get the hang of it, but it isn't as effective as something like the Bottom Tree Striker super to get multi-kills in 6v6 modes. Some strong exotic pairings with the subclass include Dunemarchers, which can chain lightning to enemies after hitting them with a ballistic slam. Also, Syntheseps can turn the ballistic slam into a one-shot kill attack if 3 enemies are close enough together to proc the perk. We're going to put this one in the B tier. It's a solid pick, but it's outshined a bit by a couple other Titan options. And finally for Striker, we have the bottom tree, Code of the Juggernaut. Our perks here are Reversal, melee kills immediately trigger health regeneration, Frontal Assault, strike an enemy with this melee ability to reload your weapon and increase both your weapon's stability and weapon damage, Knockout, critically wounding an enemy or breaking their shields increases your melee range and damage, and Trample, destroying enemies with Fist of Havoc extends its duration. Okay, I think the first thing to talk about here is Frontal Assault. This perk and its synergy with Knockout is the cornerstone of bottom tree Striker's punching focused playstyle. The extra damage and weapon stability gained after landing a melee attack as well as reloading your gun really suits an aggressive playstyle. Shotgun melee on this tree is incredibly effective. If you're hitting your shots in a gunfight, you'll almost always have the Knockout perk procced, giving you more melee range and damage. This means that you can shotgun from further away to pepper enemies and take down some of their health, and then because the melee also does extra damage, you're almost never going to lose melee engagements. Then when you do win the melee fight, you get your health regenerated from Reversal. There's so much melee synergy here, it's insane. You can also frequently take down supers by shotgun meleeing them because your shotgun also gives you Knockout, and then the Knockout melee damage is enough to finish them off. Also, the damage buff from Frontal Assault, paired with a Vorpal weapon shotgun like the Fellwinter's Lie, is sometimes enough to take out a super outright. On top of all that, if your melee is charged when you punch, you now have Frontal Assault, and 150 RPM hand cannons hit for 81 damage headshots. The downside of this melee-focused neutral game is that good players will keep you at a distance with their good movement and team shotting, and will basically deactivate the majority of your neutral game perks. If you don't like to take close engagements, this really isn't going to be your ideal subclass. The super is also very strong, especially in modes like 6v6, where you can go on some crazy killing sprees with the Trample perk by extending your time that the super is active. Even after some of the recent nerfs, the time that you can keep the super going is pretty crazy. We debated a bit on where this class belongs in the tier list, and we decided to put it S tier, mostly for its ability to get those insanely high kill games in 6v6 modes. By the way, my friend Castle recently created a great video covering the Titan exotic boots, Dunemarchers, with some examples on both middle and bottom tree Striker Titan. I'll link to it in the description for you to check out. Okay, so we're done with the Arc Titan, and let's move on to our Solar Titan, the Sunbreaker. Starting with top tree, Code of the Fireforged. Our perks are Tempered Metal, solar ability kills grant you and nearby allies bonus movement and reload speed, Hammer Strike, while sprinting use this melee ability to swing a blazing hammer that weakens enemies, Explosive Pyre, enemies killed by Hammer of Soul explode, and Vulcan's Rage, hammers shatter into explosive molten embers on impact. Okay, let's start by talking about Hammer Strike, which is the solar version of Shoulder Charge. This works pretty similar to the arc variety, except that it applies a weakening effect to enemies. In PvP, a shoulder charge will typically kill any enemy outright, so this isn't really all that important, except against supers where the extra melting point damage and delayed health regeneration from the burn effect could potentially make it a bit easier for you or a teammate to finish off a kill against the super after that shoulder charge. Hammer Strike has a decent wind-up time to activate though, and if the sprint would stay active right after aiming down sights or sliding, then it would be very good, but alas it does not. It also doesn't always register hits reliably, which is a problem that plagues each version of Shoulder Charge. One of the plus sides of each version of Shoulder Charge is that it does offer some additional mobility, which is something that's sorely lacking on Titan compared to the Hunter with Dodge and top tree Dawnblade's Icarus Dash. Getting Tempered Metal from solar ability kills is nice to have, but not all that big of a game changer for PvP. Since it requires an ability kill, it's not going to happen all that often, and when you're in your super getting kills, your allies probably don't need that buff all that much. The exploding effect of Explosive Pyre in your super can help get multi-kills when enemies are stacked on top of each other, which is nice, but not as strong as something like the super extension from Bottom Tree Striker. The super itself is pretty lethal. It's very difficult to not get the kill when you're throwing your hammer towards an enemy. It also is a ranged attack, so that can help you to win some duels against melee supers like Arcstriders and Spectral Blades if you have some good movement. We're going to put this subclass in the C tier. Next up is Middle Tree Sunbreaker, Code of the Devastator. And our perks here are Throwing Hammer, throw a hammer from a distance. After throwing it, picking up the hammer fully recharges your melee ability. Burning Maul, summon a flaming maul and crush enemies with the force of an earthquake. Tireless Warrior, after hitting an enemy with your throwing hammer, picking up the hammer triggers your health regeneration. And Roaring Flames, kills with your solar abilities increase those abilities' damage, stacks up to 3 times. Okay, I have to share something kind of funny here. Castle was the one providing notes and gameplay for the subclass, and the very first line of his notes was, "Much better than top tree, 10,000%. Indeed, this subclass is fairly strong right now, especially in 6v6 modes with a lot of content creators starting to play with some fun builds like using the exotic armor Ashen Wake. The first thing to cover here are the throwing hammers. They help you win so many engagements against low health targets. On top of this, you can go pick up your hammer after you throw it, regardless if it hits an enemy or not, to refill your melee charge. And then it also regenerates your health if you did manage to land a hit when you pick it back up. Throwing a hammer at an enemy with just 2 stacks of Roaring Flames will give you a 1-hit kill in PvP against regular enemies up to about 4 resilience, and as long as you keep those chaining hammers going, you can go on some pretty insane sprees with it. A fun fact, by the way, the exotic boots Dunemarchers can trigger the lightning effect even on just a ranged hammer hit. Burning Maul is surprisingly good for a super. You'd think it would be kinda bad because it's so slow moving, but the damage it puts out is massive. Also, they recently buffed the height of the heavy attack, so it's tougher than you'd think to jump over it and avoid getting hit. The heavy attack also has a tendency to bend around corners and land hits which are really crazy. We're gonna put this one in the B tier. And finally, we have Bottom Tree Sunbreaker, Code of the Siegebreaker. Our perks here are Soul Invictus. Solar ability kills restore your health. Grenade, melee ability, and Sun Warrior kills leave a deadly sunspot in their wake. Mortar Blast, strike an enemy with this ability to release a solar explosion, setting nearby enemies on fire. Sun Warrior, passing through a sunspot causes your grenade and melee abilities to recharge faster and your super to last longer. It also increases all damage that you do. And Endless Siege, hammers create a sunspot on impact. While standing in sunspots, you throw hammers faster. So the key to this subclass are all of the sunspots which can be created by solar ability kills, super kills, and by killing an enemy by standing in one of your existing sunspots. These sunspots grant you the Sun Warrior perk, which increases your damage in PvP by 20%, in addition to recharging your grenade and melee abilities faster and making your super last longer. There's a lot of synergy in the subclass between solar ability and health regen and granting that Sun Warrior perk. The exotic boots Phoenix Cradle ramp up this synergy effect even more by doubling the time that you can spend in Sun Warrior and also granting that buff to teammates. Restoring health on solar ability kills comes in handy quite often, especially with grenade kills and melee kills. In particular, thermite grenades are pretty underrated here. They're really great for locking down lanes and generating multi-kills in doorways, and they last for a surprisingly long duration. Mortar Blast is a very strong melee ability. It does 90 damage initially and has a long burn effect which will really chews away at enemy health. It's also great for burning out supers as long as there's a little bit of damage done before the melee, like a shotgun melee combo for example. As for the super, the hammers have great range and a pretty generous hitbox. Super kills give a good amount of health back and create a sunspot, and super duration is on the higher end of supers in the game, especially when you're utilizing those sunspots. In particular, it's pretty great in super versus super battles due to the hitbox of the hammers, the sunspot damage, and the range at which the hammers can be thrown. Overall, utilizing sunspots creates a ton of synergy in the neutral game, which can be constantly regenerating health, buffing your own damage, and recharging your solar abilities quicker. Pair that with a great super and you have a winner. We're going to put this one in the A tier. And finally for Titan, we have the Void subclass Sentinel. Our top tree option is Code of the Protector. For our perks, we have Rallying Force, melee kills restore health for you and nearby allies. Defensive Strike, defeat an enemy with this melee ability to create an overshield around you and nearby allies. Final Blows grant melee energy when this overshield is active. Turn the Tide, your overshield from Defensive Strike lasts longer and increases melee damage and reload speed. And Ward of Dawn, when super energy is full, create an indestructible dome to protect you and your allies. Passing through Ward of Dawn grants you and your allies temporary increase to weapon damage. So back in Season 3 PvP, Top Tree Sentinel was one of the strongest Titan subclasses in the game. These days a lot of other subclasses have really blown past it, but it's still a pretty good option. Melee kills give you an overshield which can help you to win 1v2 fights when you're in shotgun melee range, and these melee kills can make your next melee hit deal even more damage which can potentially win you a big engagement. The health regeneration from Rallying Force also ties in with this, where you can keep punching and getting your health back for both yourself and your nearby allies. The super can be used either as a defensive bubble by holding your super button, or an offensive sentinel mode where you swing and throw your shield like Captain America. The Ward of Dawn bubble version is especially powerful when it comes to capping zones or playing in a team. Even just the orbs generated alone can sometimes make it worth using the bubble version in modes like Trials of Osiris, where you can grant 2 teammates a super a little bit earlier than normal. However, if you step out of the bubble and die, your bubble dies with you, so you need to be really careful of your positioning as a bubble titan. Using the exotic helmet, Helm of Satan 14 also grants you an overshield to allies who pass through your bubble, so this can be a pretty useful swappable exotic. Overall, we decided to put this subclass in the B tier. It's a decent choice with the team utility provided from the bubble, and the melee playstyle granting overshields is useful, but not quite as strong as some other options. Next up is the middle tree option, Code of the Commander. The perks here are Tactical Strike, strike an enemy with this melee ability to cause a void explosion, Banner Shield, guard with Sentinel Shield to create a defensive wall, allies who shoot through the wall have increased weapon damage, and guarding allies makes the shield last longer, Control Demolition, hit a target with a void ability to attach a void detonator, further hits cause the detonator to explode, dealing damage to surrounding targets, and Resupply, you and your nearby allies regain health as well as grenade and melee energy when your void detonators explode. Okay, so this subclass really excels when you pair it with a setup to get your grenades back faster, such as a high discipline stat and mods like Enhanced Bomber. The playstyle here revolves around being patient and a little bit passive, where you throw your grenades or land charged melee hits to tag enemies, which are then attached with void detonators, and then further damage can cause these detonators to explode. The way this works is a little bit confusing, and maybe in the comment section someone can clarify the exact mechanics for how these work. From testing with friends, this is what we found out. After the target is tagged by either a void nade or a charged melee, you'll start to see them glowing purple. Applying enough further damage will change that animation to where you see purple stuff spinning around them quickly, and that lets you know that the detonator is primed to explode. A tiny bit of extra damage in this state will cause the target to explode, dealing 80 damage to the target, which will kill it, and then also dealing 80 damage to any enemies close enough to that AoE effect. However, sometimes if you hit the target with enough damage in one hit, it will automatically explode the detonator, both killing the target and dealing that nearby damage. For example, here it is working with a beloved body shot against a full health target, and then the same thing with a mountaintop sticky grenade. By the way, this also seems to work when a teammate is the one dealing the killing damage. So as soon as you or a teammate deals enough damage to proc that explosion effect, it will kill the target and then grant both you and your teammates health as well as grenade and melee energy. This can be absolutely huge in 3v3 team fights, causing your team to win a battle. Since Void Titan has access to suppression grenades, which are some of the strongest grenades in the entire game, this makes for a very potent combo, especially in 3v3 modes like Survival, Trials of Osiris, and Private Match Scrims. The super is also possibly the strongest super in the entire game. It has the utility of throwing shields like other Void trees, but then it also holds a giant banner shield which damages enemies in the shield area, and buffs the damage of allies shooting through the shield with weapons of light, while also blocking damage that would normally hit your allies. Winning most super 1v1 battles is a cakewalk on this tree. The super produces a huge amount of orbs for your teammates just by blocking damage, which can really boost your teammates towards their next super. On top of this, you also have the option to swap to the Titan Gauntlet's Ursa Furiosa before popping your super, which then lets you move faster while guarding, and then also converting damage that you guard into super energy as soon as the super ends, so you can get your next super back even faster. This essentially forces the other team to not try to fight you while your super is popped, because if they don't kill you outright, they'll have to face your next super even faster. Overall, Code of the Commander is a very strong subclass, but arguably much better for 3v3 play than 6v6. Its passive playstyle has both a high skill floor and a high skill ceiling in comparison to the other Titan subclasses. We decided to put this one in the A tier. And finally for the Titan, we have the bottom tree, Code of the Aggressor. The perks on this tree are Superior Arsenal, Grenade Kills recharge your grenade energy, Shield Bash, after sprinting for a short time, use this melee ability to unleash a devastating Shield Bash that disorients enemies and suppresses the target of Shield Bash. In the Trenches, kills while surrounded by enemies reduce the cooldown of your super, and Second Shield, gain an additional shield throw charge while Sentinel's shield is active. Starting with the melee ability, Shield Bash is arguably the best version of Shoulder Charge since it can suppress enemy supers. However, the hit detection on this can be really finicky and inconsistent. Not to mention, it's pretty tough to line up a Shoulder Charge against better players who have really good game awareness and movement. This subclass suffers from not having all that much inherent perk synergy. Rather, it's a few different perks that all seem to kind of work by themselves. For example, you can get your grenades back faster when you land grenade kills, which is cool but doesn't really affect much of the rest of the subclass. The super is fairly strong, but it can have some inconsistency with the melee hits. I find the best way to get hits with the super is to do the shield bash where you quickly melee twice to lunge with your shield. The best part of the super is getting an extra shield throw. These shields are incredibly generous with their tracking, and it's not uncommon to get 3 to 4 kills by throwing a shield down a hallway. One of my favorite ways to run the subclass is with the exotic gloves Doomfang Pauldrons. Using these exotic gloves cause void melees to grant super energy, while in your sentinel super, melee kills recharge your shield throw, which allows you to throw more of those generous tracking shields, which then also extend your super duration on hit. Overall, this is a really fun 6v6 subclass, and there's some cool builds you can do with it, but it's probably the weakest of any of the Void Titan options. We're going to put this one down in the D tier. Okay, so that wraps up our Titan subclasses. Next, let's cover the Warlock, starting once again with the arc options. So our first subclass to cover is the top tree Stormcaller, Attunement of Conduction. Our perks here are Transcendence. When cast with full grenade and melee energy, Storm Trance lasts longer and fully restores health. Chain Lightning. This electrocuting melee ability chains lightning from the struck target to nearby enemies. Arc Web. Enemies damaged by your grenades can chain deadly lightning to nearby enemies. Each grenade or melee chain returns grenade energy. And Ionic Blink. Activate to teleport during Storm Trance. Let's start with the grenade ability Arc Web. This is the grenade ability that spreads lightning between enemies that are too close together. According to Apathettic, it's best paired with the storm grenades for the best tagging potential since hunters can easily dodge arc bolt grenades, while storm grenades also tag for damage twice, creating more opportunities to chain those enemies together. Using a storm grenade with Arc Web is a great playstarter for 6v6 or 3v3 modes. It creates an opportunity for a strong push where your team can take advantage of the chaos and get a quick team wipe. It also creates a scatter effect as enemies try to get away from each other to stop the chaining, which then causes them to give up any favorable positioning. It's important to note that multiple chains also return grenade energy and can easily refill your grenade charge, which is huge. The chain lightning melee is very underrated. Damage dealt is decent, but the real benefit here is how fast the melee is executed. It makes for a great follow-up in shotgun duels as you can follow up your melee seemingly faster than any other class. Overall, the neutral game has a lot of potential, but is very reliant on solid execution using your grenade as a playstarter. As far as the super goes, Transcendence is a great ability for extending your super duration, but it can be hard to trigger if you're not paying attention since you need to have both your melee and grenade energy full. The super attack has decent range and has the benefit of chaining multiple enemies together at the same time for some easy multi-kills. Ionic Blink allows you to be evasive in your super and dodge enemy fire. It has a high skill ceiling, and if you're really talented, Ionic Blink can be hard to beat. In particular, it's great against enemy supers since you can use Ionic Blink to close the gap on supers like Dawnblade, or to create separation against supers like Spectral Blades or Bottom Tree Striker. On the downside, if your blink is used incorrectly, it can make you very predictable, and the super itself is pretty squishy. If you pop it a bit too early, you can also get team shot out of it pretty easily. Also, excessive blinking will drain your super energy quickly and end your super prematurely, which can make you come out of your super mid-blink. Overall, this is a really solid subclass, certainly one of the best options for Warlocks in PvP. We're going to put this one in the A tier. By the way, Apathettic put out a great video guide covering the best loadouts, armor stats, and exotic options for Top Tree Stormcaller. You can check it out with a link in the description. Next up is the middle tree option, Attunement of Control. Our perks here are Ball Lightning, fire an arc projectile that travels forward and releases a perpendicular bolt of lightning, Chaos Reach, unleash a long-range channel beam of concentrated arc energy. While active, press your super button again to deactivate Chaos Reach early and save super energy. Ionic Trace, defeating enemies has a chance to create Ionic Traces. Collecting Ionic Traces grants energy to all of your abilities, and Pulse Wave, being critically wounded, triggers an energy wave that boosts yours and your allies' speed. Let's talk first about the melee ability. It deals 70 damage and has decent range, but the travel time is really slow. It does have potential against Titans behind barricades, but by itself it's not really that game changing. The best way to use it seems to be a wombo combo method, like the Void Hunter with a smoke and grenade combo thrown rapidly together. Pulse Wave here is probably the second best thing about the subclass. It allows you to barely escape engagements with the increased movement speed. Movement buffs in Destiny are always a huge benefit in higher level play, and this one's no different. It also speeds up your teammates and lasts 10 seconds, which is a pretty generous amount. Ionic Trace is probably the best aspect of the neutral game. Collecting Ionic Traces is great for reducing your cooldowns. It's typically a little bit better in 6v6 since there's potential for more kills, and it's not nearly as potent in 3v3 modes. The super is great for killing 1 or 2 enemies and then cancelling it to keep up to about half of your super. You can also swap to the exotic Warlock boots Geomag Stabilizers to speed up that last bit of your super generation, which is a great way to get multiple supers per game. It's pretty tough sometimes to acquire targets while casting your super due to that awkward camera angle where the super animation kind of artificially increases your time to kill. It's also pretty easy to be team shot out of it due to the cast time and the need to jump high up in the air to get your line of sight on enemies. Being stationary in the air allows you to be shot from multiple angles. Most supers can close the gap on you or dodge the super altogether, so you need to be really smart about when and how you pop this ability. Super vs super battles, for example, tend to result in a trade at best unless you use it really wisely. Overall, we're going to put this one in the B tier. And finally for the Arc Warlock, we have the bottom tree option, Attunement of the Elements. Our perks here are Landfall. On casting Storm+Drang, fire a bolt of lightning into the ground, creating a devastating shockwave around you. Rising Storm, this electrocuting melee ability recharges your super, grenade, and melee energy. Electrostatic Surge, your rift lasts longer, it charges faster when allies are near. And Arc Soul, your rift now grants you or an ally that uses it an Arc Soul to aid in battle. Okay, so let's start with the cutest part of this skill tree, your little Arc Buddy. Arc Soul is like having an extra weapon shooting at your enemies alongside you at any time when you pop a rift. This also benefits any teammates who pass through the rift. The damage that Arc Buddy does alone isn't that notable, but occasionally it can provide that little bit of extra damage you need to finish off a low health target. There's also some synergy with being near your teammates with your rift and the Electrostatic Surge perk. Since your rifts recharge faster near allies, you can often get them back really quickly. This can open up the possibility for some really cheeky builds like killing with a single body shot from a high impact sniper, or 2-tapping with a 110 RPM hand cannon. The melee ability will recharge all of your abilities, but it isn't all that powerful by itself. Probably the weakest part of the subclass is the super. The perk Landfall can kill enemies near them if you pop it on top of them, but it sorely lacks a mobility option. Without something like Top Tree's Ionic Blink, you'll find yourself often getting team shot to death with no ability to evade the onslaught of damage. Just watch these clips where my poor friend Brave was obliterated by team shots, where he could have had an easy multi-kill situation with any decent super. We're going to rank this one down in the lowest tier, D tier. Okay, so with the Arc Warlock options completed, let's move on to the Solar Warlock, Dawnblade. Our top tree option is Attunement of Sky. Our perks on this tree are Winged Sun, fire weapons, send celestial fire, and throw grenades while gliding. Airborne Final Blows extend the effects of heat rises and grant melee energy. Celestial Fire, send out a spiral of 3 explosive solar energy blasts. Heat Rises, hold grenade to consume your grenade energy to extend glide time and improve in-air accuracy. And Icarus Dash, activate while midair to dodge twice. Oh man, where to begin? Top Tree Dawnblade is arguably the best PvP subclass in the entire game right now, especially when paired with an elite level player. Let's start with Winged Sun, the ability to fire weapons and use abilities while gliding. This is a very underrated perk on the subclass. It makes taking those in-air shots and engaging with enemies in the air even easier, and it gives you the feeling of always having great accuracy even when airborne. This also removes jumping and shooting on a Warlock as a pain point, which is ordinarily something that really holds Warlocks back. On top of this, when you get a kill while in the air, you get melee energy back towards Celestial Fire, which is arguably the best melee ability in the entire game. It's an AoE wrist rocket that deals 105 damage to any enemy hit by the effect. It has basically infinite range, travels really fast, has great tracking and the ability to slightly track around corners, and it can damage titans hiding behind barricades or finish off some low health enemies. If that all wasn't enough, Icarus Dash may be the most powerful movement ability in all of Destiny 2 right now. It allows you to escape most supers and dangerous engagements with how fast you can throw yourself across the map. You can buy yourself enough time to win almost any gunfight. The biggest factor here is the boost that it provides to survivability. The value of being able to dodge a mile away from an engagement in just a second is superior to basically any other movement ability in the entire game. And finally, for the neutral game, Heat Rises is a great ability, especially when sniping. It allows you to get some uncommon angles on your enemies and engage from parts of the map that other classes simply can't reach. It's best for getting the jump on unsuspecting opponents, but if you use it too often, you can become a bit predictable and easy to shut down. On top of all these great neutral game perks, we still haven't even talked about the super. Icarus Dash during your super provides a similar level of evasiveness as Ionic Blink from the Stormcaller in terms of its utility. It can be used to either close a gap or create space when in a super versus super battle, and it's great for covering a lot of ground very quickly. The thrown blades have pretty decent tracking, but if not used sparingly, they can reduce your super duration really drastically. So pacing your swords and aiming accurately are key to the super's effectiveness. For higher level play, Icarus dashing out of corners is a helpful way to avoid getting headshot out of your super, which is something that a lot of slower supers struggle with, especially in 3v3 modes like Trials of Osiris and tournament play. Overall, Top Tree Dawnblade is clearly an insanely strong subclass right now, and worthy of S tier for both 3v3 and 6v6 game modes. It's arguably the best class in the entire game right now, and there's a good reason that so many high-level players have adopted it as their main subclass. Next up for Dawnblade is the middle tree option, Attunement of Grace. Our perks here are Guiding Flame, strike an enemy with its melee ability to inflict burn damage and empower yourself and nearby allies. Well of Radiance, thrust your Daybreak sword into the ground. The sword continuously projects a powerful aura that heals and empowers nearby allies. Divine Protection, hold to convert your grenade into a blessing that heals ally targets and drops overshields that you and your allies can pick up. Activate Divine Protection while gliding to hover in midair. And Benevolent Dawn, healing or empowering your allies, regenerates your grenade, melee, and rift energy. Middle Tree Dawnblade is our first true support class in the game, which makes it incredibly strong in PvE, but kind of an unusual pick for PvP. On the bright side, it's great for team play, offering several methods to heal teammates with the charged Divine Protection grenades, healing rifts, and super. You can also get your abilities back incredibly quickly when cycling through the various methods of buffing your teammates through the Benevolent Dawn perk. And Guiding Flame provides a nice damage buff to teammates just based on a hit. It doesn't even require a kill to proc the effect. On the downside though, the subclass really suffers from a lack of slaying potential from its abilities. It also doesn't have the mobility of something like Top Tree Dawnblade for getting around the map. When you drop your Well of Radiance, you're basically stuck in that location if you want to receive the benefits of the well. Meanwhile, you and your teammates can still be headshot killed by a sniper, so against smarter players, it's kind of like a worse version of the Titan Bubble. There are some really fun build synergies with the damage buff from Empowering Rifts and the Well of Radiance. For example, I'll link in the description as well as on screen here one of my favorite Warlock builds, which turns the Sturm+Drang combo into a one-hit kill hand cannon. It's a blast to use for 6v6, but probably not something you'd want to bring into Trials. Since we don't have the typical trinity found in MMO games of a damage dealer, tank, and healer in Destiny PvP, Middle Tree Dawnblade feels a little bit out of place for higher levels of play, despite having some really fun build potential. We're going to rank it down in the D tier. And finally for the Dawnblade Warlock, we have Bottom Tree, Attunement of Flame. Our perks here are Fated for the Flame, Daybreak projectiles seek targets as they travel, and upon impact launch a streak of deadly flames. Igniting Touch, strike an enemy with this ability to burn them and cause them to explode when killed. Everlasting Fire, killing an enemy with Daybreak increases its duration. And Phoenix Dive, activate while midair to quickly descend and restore your health. While Daybreak is active, Descent causes explosive damage and returns super energy. The only really special thing about the neutral game here is the Phoenix Dive, but the amount of health you regenerate is pretty negligible, especially in PvP. Also, there's a significant pause when landing, which makes you really vulnerable to attack. Other than that, the melee is a pretty basic melee that has potential to do good damage to multiple opponents if you're able to cause one to explode, but that's not really going to happen all that often. The burn effect is nice, but it's nowhere near as close to being useful as the ranged attack from Top Tree Dawn's Celestial Fire melee. And 2 of our 4 perks here actually only buff the super. So as you'd guess, the super on the subclass is actually pretty much the only good thing. Tracking on the sword throws is actually kind of insane. You're pretty much guaranteed to get 5 to 6 kills in 6v6 modes due to Everlasting Fire as long as you don't get killed out of it too quickly and have good positioning on the enemy. However, the mobility of the super is pretty terrible without something like Icarus Dash, and for 3v3 modes it can be outran pretty easily. And the poor mobility on smaller maps really hurts the super since there's no open areas to allow those swords to track. The fact that the projectiles also release a trail of flame on impact makes it pretty good against other supers because of that additional damage. You can even defeat a Titan Bubble pretty easily. Overall, this subclass is not doing so hot in the current sandbox, and we're going to rank it down in the D tier. And lastly for Warlock, we have our Void subclass, Voidwalker. Our top tree option is called Attunement of Chaos. The perks here are Chaos Accelerant, Overcharge your grenade, making it deadlier and more effective, Entropic Pull, strike an enemy with this melee ability to drain your enemy's life force and use it to recharge your grenade, Bloom, void abilities cause enemies to explode, and Cataclysm, Nova Bomb travels slowly and seeks enemies. Detonations shatter into smaller seeking projectiles. Fire your weapon at the Nova Bomb to detonate it early. Okay, so this subclass is all about grenades and explosions. You can hold your grenade button to charge it, which increases the damage output. These grenades will then cause enemies to explode if you're able to kill them directly with it. You can also get charged melee or super kills to cause those bloom explosions. In PvP, bloom explosions do pretty decent damage, but the targets need to be pretty close together to get the benefit. The charged melee ability will refresh some of your grenade energy, which is a nice benefit, but there's not much other synergy around melees unless you get a charged melee to proc that bloom effect. The neutral game really doesn't have much else going for it in PvP. It's certainly one of the weaker options in the game. The super fires off a gigantic Nova Bomb that slowly moves around the map tracking targets. When it explodes, it also creates tiny Nova Bombs that can track targets for additional kills. Against unaware players, the super can get you a decent amount of kills, but smarter players are going to be able to pretty easily avoid the super with good movement. You can also directly shoot the super to make it explode early. Overall, there really isn't much reason to use this subclass in PvP, and we're going to rank it down in the D tier. However, with the right build, it can be really fun. Next up is the middle tree option, Attunement of Fission. Our perks here are Atomic Breach, this melee ability creates a void explosion, Nova Warp, step between dimensions and subvert laws of physics, Sprint to teleport a short distance, Hold and release to unleash a deadly void eruption, Handheld Supernova, converts your grenade into a short-range void blast on release, and Dark Matter, void ability kills grant health and melee, grenade and class ability energy. Let's first talk about the melee ability, Atomic Breach. It's a really strong melee ability with a lot of utility. It has a strong pushback effect on the enemy, which deals good damage and creates a lot of space to change the engagement. Handheld Supernova is still decent and it's pretty deadly overall, but it feels pretty inconsistent ever since the recent nerf. It's very easy to overestimate the range and barely get a hit on the target. It is still good for countering shotgun pushers in 6v6, but for higher level 3v3 play, there's definitely not as much viability, since experienced players can easily counter it with some smart movement and positioning. The health regen aspect of Handheld Supernova feels good, but it's not that game changing since it's really a small bump in health. Overall, the neutral game is decent with ability kills recharging your health and ability energy, but Handheld Supernova is no longer strong enough to choose it over something like Top Tree Stormcaller or Top Tree Dawnblade, even when you pair it with exotic gauntlets like the Controverse Hold. As far as the super goes, Teleport is an amazing feature for this super for quickly moving around a map. It's great for closing the gap on an enemy, but if you mistime it, it can cause you to get shotgunned out of your super. You also can't charge up the attack while teleporting. The super has a pretty high skill floor, and mistiming your attack can make you really vulnerable and easy to shut down. The amount that your movement is slowed down while charging your attack feels excessive, and it really highlights the importance of timing your charge correctly. Getting small bursts of health back on kill is nice, especially with multi-kills, but the super is one of the squishiest in the game. It's easy to get team shot out of it, which leaves little margin for error while using your super. Overall, we're going to put this one in the C tier. And finally, we have a bottom tree Voidwalker, Attunement of Hunger. Our perks here are Feed the Void, consume your grenade energy to regenerate your health, grants the Devour effect, Devour, kills with this melee ability fully regenerate your health. For a short time afterward, kills restore additional health. Insatiable, while the Devour effect is active, killing enemies extends the duration and recharges your grenade. And Vortex, Nova Bomb creates a singularity which continually damages enemies trapped inside. Kills with Nova Bomb grant the Devour effect. Okay, so this tree completely revolves around the Devour perk, which is pretty much the only good thing going for the subclass. There's a high skill floor since Devour requires strong fundamentals when it comes to movement, positioning, map awareness, and gun skill in order to be effective. When Devour is used effectively to chain together kills, it can be very powerful, and kills with Devour do charge your grenades really quickly. Overall, outside of Devour though, there really isn't much special going for this class, which is a bummer because Devour is such a cool gameplay mechanic to reward aggressive play. It should also be noted that there is a slight delay before your health returns with Devour, and sometimes that can still result in a trade even if you're getting your health back on Devour, which makes it useless in those closer situations. When it comes to the super, Nova Bomb is the definition of a kamikaze super. It's very easy to accidentally kill yourself while hitting your enemy. The Nova Bomb blast radius size makes it pretty hard to land at a distance, which forces you to be pretty close to enemies while casting it. It's very easy to whiff and also dodge as an enemy player. The cast time animation also makes it pretty easy to predict when it's coming. The super does proc Devour, which is nice to have, but I think most players would probably love to trade that for a larger blast radius to make it easier to land hits. Overall, Bottom Tree Voidwalker is in a pretty tough spot right now. Devour alone is incredibly strong, but unfortunately that's basically all the subclass has going for it. We're going to put this one down in the C tier. Okay, and with Warlock and Titan covered, let's move on to everyone's favorite, the Hunter. Starting with Arc again, our first subclass to cover is Top Tree Arcstrider, Way of the Warrior. Our perks here are Combat Flow, melee kills recharge your dodge ability, Combination Blow, kill an enemy with this melee ability to trigger health regeneration and increase your melee damage temporarily, stacks up to 3 times, Deadly Reach, dodging increases your melee range, allowing you to lunge further to strike enemies, and Lethal Current, after dodging, each Arc Staff hit creates a damaging lightning aftershock. The neutral game of the subclass option revolves around melee combat, regenerating your health through Combination Blow and refreshing your dodge with Combat Flow. Each stack of Combination Blow increases its damage. In PvP, the base melee does 100 damage, 1 stack does 123, 2 stacks do 151, and 3 stacks deal 185 damage per melee. In 3v3 play, you're not going to be stacking this buff very often, but in 6v6 with the right lobby, you can make some really fun plays with this perk synergy. Dodging near an enemy also increases your melee lunge range, in addition to recharging your melee energy if you choose the Gambler's Dodge option. If you manage to kill an enemy with a charged melee, your health gets immediately refreshed. It can make for a really fun and aggressive playstyle, especially when you pair it with a good shotgun, using the shotgun melee combo to finish kills and refresh your health. As far as the super goes, Arcstrider in general struggles from a big lack of speed. It's pretty easy for fast-moving Warlocks, Skating Titans, and Stompy Hunters to evade your super, since even with the jumping and swiping, you really don't pick up much speed. Lethal Current does increase your damage if you dodge first before melee attacking, but it's not enough damage to get a kill against roaming supers in most situations. Overall, this subclass is quite a bit more valuable in PvE than PvP, but it's still pretty viable in 6v6 modes. We're going to put this one in the C tier. Let's move on to the middle tree option, Way of the Current. Perks here are Tempest Strike. After sliding, activate this melee ability to unleash a devastating uppercut attack. Whirlwind Guard, used while wielding your Arc Staff to deflect incoming projectiles. Deflecting projectiles triples Arc Staff damage for a short time. Lightning Weave, melee hits greatly increase weapon reload speed, and Ebb and Flow, hit a target with an arc ability to electrify them. Meleeing electrified enemies disorients them and grants grenade, melee, and dodge energy. This subclass is really fun to play with a few cool tools. First off is the melee ability Tempest Strike. You can fling this attack at enemies and potentially get multiple hits, each dealing 130 damage. It's not strong enough to get a one-hit kill by itself, but it makes for some really easy cleanup kills. Smart players can bait enemies through a doorway and then hit with Tempest Strike to make some great use of this ability. The energy return from Ebb and Flow is nice to have, but usually doesn't have a major impact in gameplay. We also have Lightning Weave, which increases reload speed after melee. It's a nice ability to proc, and occasionally it might help you win a gunfight when you really need that quick reload from a hand cannon or a shotgun. The super on this subclass is arguably the best of any version of Arcstrider. You can guard attacks by spinning your staff to reflect projectiles back at enemies. Blocking attacks also gives you a damage buff that allows you to kill many enemy supers in a single light attack. It guards a pretty incredible amount of things, including many enemy supers, but at the cost of eating some of your super energy faster. It's a great ability for closing the gap against team shots, but it doesn't address the biggest issue with Arcstrider, which is the movement speed and the poor hit detection. Pairing the super with the exotic chest Raiju's Harness can really boost the power of the super, since you can cut it off early and save a considerable amount of your super energy. The subclass is really fun to play, but not all that powerful compared to a few other subclass options. We're going to put this one in the B tier. And finally for Arcstrider, we have the bottom tree, Way of the Wind. Our perks here are Focused Breathing, Sprinting recharges your dodge ability, increased maximum sprint speed, Disorienting Blow, strike an enemy with this melee ability to disorient the target and nearby enemies, Combat Meditation, while critically wounded, melee and grenades recharge drastically faster, and Lightning Reflexes, you are harder to kill while dodging. This subclass tree has arguably the best neutral game of any hunter subclass. It synergizes incredibly well together, and it's one of my personal favorites in the game. You have a melee ability that blinds both the enemy that you hit as well as any others nearby, and hitting with this melee ability and then jumping backwards to disengage is an incredibly effective way to win melee duels. Lightning Reflexes reduces your incoming damage while dodging, and this can save your life from so many close calls. It's pretty common to just barely survive by taking a combination of damage that would normally kill you, and therefore increasing the time to kill by forcing your opponents to hit more shots. When you sprint, you recharge your dodge ability even faster than normal, plus you have a baseline faster sprint speed. And as we mentioned earlier, movement buffs in Destiny are always a good thing. The Combat Meditation perk is great for recharging your melee and grenade energy faster when you're hurt. As we mentioned with the other Arcstrider trees, the super is one of the weaker points of the subclass, and the bottom tree is no exception. It's pretty common to have your opponents just straight outrun you, and you don't have a ranged attack, so you really need to be smart about your engagements. The hit detection can be pretty frustrating at times as well. The Palm Strike ability that you can pull off with a light attack, heavy attack combo is really strong, and it can one-shot most roaming supers to win a duel. But often, better players will know to watch out for this if they see you starting up that combo. Even with the somewhat lackluster super, the neutral game alone is amazing enough that we decided to put this one in the S tier. Next up, let's cover the top tree gunslinger, Way of the Outlaw. Our perks here are Chain of Woe, precision kills increase weapon reload speed for you and nearby allies, proximity explosive knife, throw a knife that attaches to a surface upon impact and explodes when it detects an enemy nearby, dead shot, significantly improves your ability to hit with the golden gun, and six shooter, golden gun can be fired quickly up to 6 times and refunds a bullet with each kill. Top Tree Goldie is another subclass similar to Top Tree Voidwalker, where half of our perks only buff the super, which is kind of unfortunate. The neutral game doesn't have a whole lot going for it here, except for the explosive knives, which are really fun to use and very effective if used properly. They pair really well in particular with the trip mine grenade option. You can do a wombo combo where you throw your knife first and then the trip mine, and the combo is often enough damage to get a few kills. The knives by themselves are also really helpful against enemies who are hiding behind cover. The explosion damage alone deals 105 damage, and it can easily clean up a kill against the weaker opponent. The only other neutral game component to talk about is Chain of Woe. This is a really nice increase to reload speed if you're hitting a lot of your headshots. The super is one of the most lethal and also squishiest supers in the entire game. A skilled player who can catch the enemy on spawn can put together some insane kill sprees. However, you get no extra damage resistance, and it's pretty easy to get it sniped or shotgunned out of your super. The nerf to damage range on your golden gun really hurts too. These days, it's really easy to leave an enemy with just a few points of health if you hit them barely out of one-shot kill range. Overall, I think this subclass is really fun to use, and you can go on some crazy sprees in 6v6 with the super if you get the right positioning, but it's not quite as strong as some other options. We're going to put this one in the B tier. Next up, let's cover the middle tree gunslinger, Way of 1,000 Cuts. Our perks here are Knife Trick, throw a fan of flaming knives that burn targets on hit, Blade Barrage, vault into the air and unleash a volley of solar charged explosive knives, Playing with Fire, destroying burning enemies recharges Knife Trick more quickly, and the Burning Edge, while enemies burn, your dodge ability recharges faster. Our neutral game on this tree mostly revolves around the burning throwing knives. The melee Knife Trick throws 3 flaming knives that split from each other further as they travel. Up close, it's pretty easy to land all 3 knives, but at a distance, you're going to need to time how you throw them and use some good crosshair movement to land the full volley. I actually made a video about these knives that I'll link in the description, as well as on screen here. They're really buggy. Sometimes they'll burn a full health target all the way down to dead, and other times the burn won't even apply and the target just stands there, only taking direct hit damage. When they do work properly and burn a target, the Burning Edge perk gives you your dodge back really fast, which can be blazingly fast when paired with high mobility. The super has been on quite a roller coaster since its release when Forsaken first dropped. After rounds of nerfs and reworks, the super is in kind of a sad state today. Occasionally it will do what it's supposed to and kill anything in front of you. Even nuking other supers is a great option for a shutdown super. However, pretty often it will also straight up whiff, and the knives will barely hurt an enemy. This is really frustrating to deal with, and the lack of consistency really hurts the subclass's potential. We're going to rank this one down in the C tier. And finally for Gunslinger, we have Bottom Tree, Way of the Sharpshooter. Our perks here are Practice Makes Perfect, Enter a Trance with each precision hit, reducing the cooldown of your golden gun, Weighted Knife, throw a knife that deals extra precision damage, precision knife kills with this melee ability immediately recharge it, knock 'em down, precision kills increase weapon stability and handling, your super does more damage when cast with this buff active with 20 or more seconds remaining, and Line 'em Up enables precision damage with the golden gun. Precision hits with golden gun generate orbs of light, increase its damage and extend its duration. Our Bottom Tree golden gun is all about precision, with your guns, knives, and super. The weighted knife is incredibly powerful in the right hands. You'll see top players like Warlock in tournaments dominating with these knives when used perfectly. If you have great aim and you can pre-charge the knife a bit and then peek just at the right time, there's basically no counter to them. However, in the hands of a less skilled player, they aren't quite as strong as they used to be when first introduced into the game with heaps of aim assist. Precision hits charge your super really fast on this tree. If you have a high intellect stat and hit your headshots consistently, it's pretty common to be the first one in the lobby with a super. And precision kills also increase your weapon stability and handling, which can be particularly helpful for controller players. When it comes to the super, you trade the multi-kill lethality of Top Tree's 6-shooter for the ability to hit precision shots, which can basically shut down any roaming super with a headshot. The shots from this version of Golden Gun also seem a bit more forgiving, and it doesn't have the same range fallout problem from Top Tree Golden Gun. I think that Top Tree Golden Gun is perhaps a little bit stronger in 6v6 modes, while Bottom Tree edges it out for 3v3 combat, especially with the ability to shut down roaming supers from range. We're going to put this one in the B tier. And the last subclass for us to cover is the Void Hunter Night Stalker. Our top tree option is called Way of the Trapper. Our perks here are Keen Scout, Sprint and Sneak Faster, and gain an enhanced tracker. Tethered enemies are marked for easy tracking. Snare Bomb, throw a smoke bomb from distance with this melee ability. The smoke bomb sticks to surfaces and detonates when enemies are near, slowing and disorienting them. Deadfall, the void anchors from Shadow Shot become traps and wait for prey. And Vanishing Step, dodging makes you vanish from sight for a short time. This subclass tree mostly revolves around stealth and deception. The melee ability Smoke Bomb sticks to surfaces and pings the radar just like an enemy would. It's a great way to confuse your opponents into not being exactly sure what is and isn't an enemy on the radar. They can also be used offensively in a wombo combo where you throw your smoke and then your grenade. The smoke traps the enemy in place and then the grenade burns their health down. It's a really easy way to secure some multi-kills. The smokes alone are also a great way to secure some 1v1 wins. You can dodge near your enemy with the Gambler's Dodge to get your smoke back, then throw it on the ground and hit your shots while the enemy can barely move or see you. On the flip side, your radar is enhanced with Keen Scout, which divides each radar section in half, giving you more fidelity in your ability to detect the direction of a threat. You also run faster, which is always a benefit when it comes to Destiny PvP. Your dodge makes you go invisible briefly, which can make you really tough to track. In particular, you'll see a lot of hunters running this tree with the exotic boots Gemini Jesters, which also temporarily blind your enemy and take away the radar. This combination can cause a lot of confusion for the enemy team. The super is by far the weakest part of the subclass tree, and the main thing that holds back this class despite the pretty good neutral game. Your void tethers are supposed to trap and suppress enemies, but it's pretty common for enemy supers to melee attack right through a tether before being detected and still kill you, and then they finally get suppressed when it's already too late. The tethers have a very obvious red glow around them, so it's pretty easy to avoid once they're already placed on the ground, and direct hits don't even kill most roaming supers with one hit. On top of these issues, the tether also has an annoying extra vertical hop when the firing animation happens, which can often lead to tethers getting stuck on the ceiling of many maps. Even if you do manage to land a successful tether, You don't get any damage resistance after the tether's fired, so it can be really hard to make a play after casting the super, and it's pretty easy to get team shot when you manage to tether multiple enemies. Overall, the super holds the subclass back way too much to give it a high ranking, despite a really strong neutral game. We're going to put this one in the B tier. Next up is the middle tree option, Way of the Wraith. Our perks here are Corrosive Smoke, throw a smoke bomb from a distance with this melee ability. The smoke bomb slows enemies and damages them over time. Spectral Blades, summon a pair of deadly void blades and stalk the battlefield in a veil of shadows. Press light attack to perform a quick melee attack, press heavy attack to perform a heavy attack and once again vanish from sight. Flawless Execution, when crouched, precision kills grant invisibility, true sight, and increased melee range. And Shattering Strike, after performing a flawless execution, your melee attacks weaken enemies. The Spectral Blades Hunter has been one of the strongest subclasses in the game for quite a while now, perhaps only slightly edged out by the top tree Dawnblade for overall effectiveness. Let's start with the wallhack ability, Flawless Execution. Anytime you get a headshot kill while crouched, you get true sight for a few seconds, which literally shows you exactly where the enemies are on the map through the walls. You don't even need a paid subscription to get these wallhacks. This ability makes landing follow-up shots, especially with precision weapons like a sniper rifle or a slug shotgun, very easy. If the neutral game had nothing else going for it, this alone would make it pretty strong. The smoke grenades on this subclass actually deal the most damage of any of the Night Stalker smokes, and make the wombo combo with your grenade of choice incredibly lethal. The debuff ability Shattering Strike works similar to the shoulder charge from top tree Sunbreaker Titan, but it requires you to get Flawless Execution proc first before landing a melee, so it's not something that's going to come into PvP all that often, but if you're able to get a melee hit against a roaming super with this perk active, it can occasionally help your team to take down that super a little bit easier. Now let's talk about the super Spectral Blades, which is one of the top super choices in the entire game. You have two modes, a regular mode and a stealth mode. The stealth mode gets a little bit more damage resistance, making it harder to kill. The super allows you to use light attacks to either swipe along the ground or to jump swipe in the air and cover some massive distance quickly. These attacks will one-shot any normal health guardian, or you can also use the heavy attack to lunge a little bit further and upwards for a kill. Heavy attacking also puts you back into stealth mode, which makes the super last a little bit longer, and also gives you wall hacks while you're roaming around and looking for your next target. In stealth mode, the super lasts about 23 seconds, which is incredibly long. This means that you can often pop your super, bait an enemy to counter pop with their super, and then just wait for theirs to run out before you come back and attack while still in your super. My favorite way to move with the super is to jump attack to roam around the map quickly and close the gap on targets, and then heavy attack to get the kill and go back into stealth mode while I'm looking for my next opponent. You can also use a combo of light attack and then a heavy attack to kill pretty much any roaming super in a duel. With a strong neutral game and an incredibly good super, we had to put this one in the S tier. And finally, we have the bottom tree, Way of the Pathfinder. Our perks here are Lockdown, grenade effects last twice as long, allowing for strong territorial control and increased damage potential, Vanish in Smoke, throw a smoke bomb from a distance, making you and nearby allies invisible, and providing the Heart of the Pack buff. Heart of the Pack grants weapon haste and increased mobility, recovery, and resilience. Combat Provision, damaging enemies with grenades grants melee ability energy, making allies invisible grants grenade energy, and Mobius Quiver, fire Shadow Shot multiple times in rapid succession. Shadow Shot deals massive damage against tethered enemies. Defeating tethered enemies creates orbs of light and grants nearby allies the Heart of the Pack buff. The main advantage of the subclass is ability uptime. Your grenade and smoke abilities last twice as long through the Lockdown perk, which allows you to get more kills with your wombo combo. Damaging enemies with your grenades makes your melee ability come back faster, and tossing your smoke to make allies and yourself invisible causes your grenades to come back faster, so if you're using your abilities wisely, you can pretty much always have either a grenade or a melee available. You also provide a buff to teammates when making them invisible, called Heart of the Pack, which buffs your weapon handling and reload, mobility, resilience, and recovery stats. The super here is really bad. In theory, it should work like Top Tree Golden Gun, where you can run around the map getting multi-kills. In practice, however, the multi-shot tether arrows are slow firing, have an awkward animation, and really don't have that great of hit detection. It's really easy to get shut down when facing multiple enemies at the same time. The size of the tethers that land are very small, and they don't have nearly the same radius to grab enemies compared to the top tree tether. It's one of the weakest supers in the game, and whenever I go to use the super, I feel like I'd legitimately be better off just using my guns. Although you can make some really cool builds with the subclass tree, it doesn't really excel in either 3v3 or 6v6 modes, and overall I think it's one of the weaker options in the game. Brave recently made a really fun build with the subclass, and it's worth checking out. I'll link it in the description. He uses the Monte Carlo and really takes advantage of the neutral game. Despite the fun build potential, we're going to put this one down in the D tier. So there you have it, there's the full tier list. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of our placements. I'd love to know what's your current favorite subclass to run for PvP. As I mentioned in the beginning, I owe a huge shout out to Brave, Apathettic, and Castle for making this video possible and contributing their thoughts and gameplay clips. I'd really appreciate it if you take a second to stop by their channels and subscribe, and leave a comment letting them know that you found them through this collaboration project. If you're new to my channel, be sure to lightly tap that subscribe button so you don't miss my next video, and also turn on post notifications. Even if you're subscribed, sometimes YouTube won't show you a new video if you don't have this turned on. I stream every week over on Twitch. You can catch me live at twitch.tv/pattycakespc. I'd love to chat with you over there while I'm streaming. We recently got our community Discord partnered, which is really cool. We have almost 3,000 members now, and we do weekly scrims, game discussion, and overall it's just a great place to make some new friends. There's a link to join in the description. I also post pretty frequently on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow me over at PattycakesGG on both platforms. So if you enjoyed this video, I have 2 recommendations for you to check out. The first is a tier list I put together with each piece of Hunter exotic armor. This one was really fun to make, and it has some great breakdowns of some of the more popular gear options. The other one is a series ranking every exotic weapon in the game into a tier list. I'll link to that playlist on screen here as well as in the description. That's all for now, catch you guys next time.